Beneath the vast, unyielding expanse of the Philippine Sea, at a crushing depth of 18,044 feet, the fractured husk of the USS Indianapolis lay entombed for 72 years, a silent sentinel to one of history's most guarded secrets. This proud vessel, entrusted with the world's most perilous cargo, had reshaped the fate of nations. Yet, in a cruel twist, she became the epicenter of the U.S. Navy's darkest hour, a swift vanishing act followed by unimaginable suffering. What hubris and shadows conspired to erase America's flagship so abruptly? And why did salvation elude her desperate crew for days on end? The truth, unearthed from classified logs, survivor testimonies, and declassified archives, unveils a harrowing epic of arrogance, clandestine gambles, and a calamity buried in bureaucratic vaults for generations. On a crisp November dawn in 1931, the USS Indianapolis sliced through the Atlantic like a blade of destiny, born from the fiery forges of New Jersey's cramped shipbuilding yard. Clad in gleaming riveted steel and measuring 610 feet from stem to stern, she embodied the unbridled optimism of a rising superpower, displacing 9,950 tons and armed with 9 8-inch guns that could hurl shells over 20 miles. The Navy pinned its dreams on her, a Portland-class heavy cruiser of breathtaking speed, up to 32.7 knots, and grace, engineered to conquer the planet's mightiest seas. Over the ensuing years, she transcended mere machinery, evolving into a living legend. She ferried President Franklin D. Roosevelt through the sun-drenched waters of the Caribbean in 1939, her decks a parade of crisp uniforms, burnished artillery, and Secret Service details vigilant against every ripple. In the crucible of the Pacific Theater, she flew the flag for Admiral Raymond Spruance during the pivotal invasions of the Aleutians in 1943, the Gilberts at Tarawa that November, and the blood-soaked Marianas Campaign of 1944, where she bombarded Saipan and Tinian under relentless kamikaze assaults. Battle after brutal battle etched her scars deeper, dents from enemy shells, shrapnel-pocked superstructures, whispers of near misses from Val dive bombers, while her crew, a brotherhood exceeding 1,196 souls, including 119 Marines, forged an unbreakable bond with her. To them, she was invincible, a floating bastion where steel met spirit, defying typhoons and torpedoes alike, her galley serving up spam and beans amid the roar of her 8 boilers driving 107,000 shaft horsepower. By 1945, as the war's tide turned inexorably toward victory, the Indianapolis reigned supreme, a battle-hardened colossus with over 10,000 miles of Pacific patrols under her belt, primed for the final, fateful summons of history. July 16, 1945, in the scorched sands outside Alamogordo, New Mexico, a blinding inferno clawed at the heavens, birthing humanity's first atomic dawn in the Trinity test. Mere days later, worlds away, the Indianapolis absorbed a mission shrouded in impenetrable fog. At San Francisco's Hunters Point Naval Shipyard on July 16, under the watchful eyes of steel-helmeted Marines and a phalanx of armed couriers from the Manhattan Project, 2 enigmatic crates were winched into her armored hold, one a fortified steel vault weighing over 10 tons, the other a deceptively simple wooden casket. Accompanied by stone-faced physicists and engineers, they were logged as routine ordnance to baffle prying eyes. But encrypted manifests betrayed the lie. Nestled within were 64 kilograms of highly enriched uranium-235, the fissile core dubbed Little Boy's Heart, along with the explosive firing assembly and other precision components for the world's first operational atomic bomb, destined to level Hiroshima. Directives from the Pentagon, sealed by Secretary of the Navy James Forrestal himself, were ironclad: no chatter on open channels, no protective convoy, maintain radio silence except for essential navigation. The cruiser would blaze a solitary trail across 5,000 nautical miles of Pacific void at flank speed, her velocity clocking an average 29 knots, a record transit time of just 10 days and 15 hours that echoes unchallenged today. Only a tight cadre of officers, including Captain Charles Butler McVay III, knew the stakes. the rank-and-file glimpsed only the twitchy sentries patrolling the forward magazine, the fortified hatches sealed with radiation warnings, and the extra Geiger counters humming in the sick bay, chalking it up to wartime jitters or experimental radar gear. For 10 relentless days, she thundered westward, her screws churning foam into oblivion, evading patrols and storms with the precision of a ghost. On July 26, she ghosted into Tinian's shadowed anchorage under cover of dusk, disgorging her apocalyptic payload to a cadre of scientists who would assemble Little Boy in a Quonset hut just 200 yards from the beach. The handoff complete, the Indianapolis paused briefly in Guam for hurried repairs to her gyrocompass and a brief shore leave, where McVay received vague orders to proceed to Leyte Gulf at a leisurely 17 knots, unescorted, unannounced, her position a cipher known to scant few in far-flung command posts, with no contingency for the submarine-infested waters ahead. The witching hour of July 30, 1945, cloaked the sea in velvet blackness some 350 miles north of Palau. Most of the crew, machinists nursing blisters from engine room watches, gunners polishing their 20mm Oerlikons, teenagers like Seaman First Class Loel Dean Cox dreaming of stateside steak, slumbered in humid bunks, lulled by the Indianapolis's rhythmic hum. At precisely 0:02, the Japanese submarine I-58, under Commander Makitsura Hashimoto, locked onto her silhouette through periscope crosshairs. 2 minutes later, at 0:14, Cataclysm, the first Type 95 torpedo lanced the starboard bow in a cataclysmic roar 40 feet below the waterline, shredding 70 feet of plating like parchment, igniting fuel tanks, and hurling men from their racks in a maelstrom of sparks, screams, and gushing seawater. Before the echoes faded, amid the klaxon's frantic wail and the groan of buckling frames, a second fish struck amidships at 0:15, kissing the No. 2 magazine just aft of the bridge. Hell erupted, a crimson inferno ballooned through bulkheads, vaporizing steel, igniting 100 tons of cordite stores in a thunderous chain reaction that blasted a 20-foot gash and collapsed the forward fire room. The forward third wrenched free in a grotesque amputation, as seawater geysered inward at 1,500 gallons per minute. Lights guttered to oblivion across all 8 decks, the 8 Babcock and Wilcox boilers wheezed their last, silencing the 212,000 horsepower heartbeat. The acrid reek of scorched fuel, ruptured bowels, and ionized air choked the corridors. In the pandemonium of the radio shack on the signal bridge, consoles erupted in flames, antennas snapped like twigs, wires fused into useless knots, any SOS dissolved into static, the lone faint transmission garbled and ignored by distant stations. Chaos reigned supreme. Abandon ship. Pass the word, bellowed Captain McVay at 0:16, his voice, a calm, Princeton-educated timbre frayed by the inferno, crackling over the 1MC amid buckling decks and howling gales, even as he clutched a life-preserver and helped a young ensign to his feet. Sailors clawed through labyrinthine passages 2 decks deep, oil-slicked and bloodied, dodging live wires spitting blue arcs and collapsing ceilings that crushed limbs like twigs. Some surfaced coughing into the inky swell, Kapok life vests askew amid 12,000 barrels of spewing fuel oil, others perished in submerged tombs below the waterline, pounding futilely on jammed hatches in the blackwater boiler rooms, their cries muffled by the 15-degree list. The deck became a 45-degree precipice by 0:20, water clawing at ankles, then waists, sweeping away the unwary. Gunnery officers like Lieutenant Stuart B. Gibson fired emergency pyrotechnics, red flares arcing futilely into the void, while damage control parties fought futilely with hand pumps against the 60,000 tons of Pacific surging in. The bow, a mangled prow twisted 20 degrees off-center, plunged first at 0:24, dragging the midships down in a vortex of froth, crates of potatoes, and shattered teak planking. At the 11th minute, the stern clawed skyward in defiance, silhouetted against a merciless moon, her 3 propellers idling uselessly. Then, with a primordial groan, the hull's death rattle, a symphony of rivets popping like gunfire, she capitulated at 0:26. In a mere 12 minutes, the Indianapolis inverted and vanished, ejecting approximately 900 souls into an obsidian nightmare littered with 150 wooden rafts, 320 kapok life jackets, and a rainbow slick of diesel that stretched a mile wide. No flare pierced the sky beyond the initial bursts, no beacon pierced the void. She was erased, as if the ocean had willed it so, claiming around 300 lives in the blasts, torn apart by shrapnel, scalded by steam, or drowned in the deluge. The sea, once a faithful highway, turned executioner. Salt and diesel fouled every breath, coating tongues with bitter venom that blistered lips and throats within hours. 900 men, machinists, gunners, boys barely out of their teens like the 17-year-old Cox, scattered across a 5-mile debris field in 80 clusters, lashed to crates of beans, kapok rafts lashed together with belts, or the frayed camaraderie of linked arms and human chains to fend off drift. Dawn's glare baked them raw by 6 o'clock, ultraviolet rays turning skin to parchment, lips cracking like parched earth as freshwater rations, mere sips from canteens that sank with the ship, dwindled to myth. Desperate sips from the brine-twisted bellies into knots of cramps and diarrhea, birthing visions of phantom rescuers on distant shores or the Indianapolis bobbing below, galley hatches agape with spam and coffee. They'd say, the Indy's down there, handing out fresh water, and dive right in, then a shark would get recalled survivor Harlan Twible, a pharmacist's mate who organized shark watches, in his group of 80, men taking turns slapping the water with oars to deter the circling predators. Twilight ushered colder horrors after the first night, the finned silhouettes of oceanic reapers, primarily short-finned oceanic whitetips, opportunistic and insatiable, joined by tiger sharks drawn to the crimson haze of wounds and the thrashing of the delirious. Up to 150 fell to their jaws over 4 days, attacks peaking at dusk in frenzied boils that turned the water to froth. One survivor watched a comrade yanked under mid-sentence, surfacing only as a crimson stain. Bosun's mate Giles McCoy felt the phantom graze of scales against his calves in the dark, a prelude to the abyss that claimed his raft mates one by one. Marine Corporal Edgar Harrell, adrift with a waterlogged Bible clutched like a talisman, buoyed a cluster of 15 through hymns and rationed urine, sipped warm from rags, his faith a flickering torch against the encroaching void, even as hallucinations whispered of palm-fringed islands just beyond reach. Cox, separated early, clung to a single crate with 2 others, enduring the boiling sea where sharks bumped legs like logs, his mind fracturing by day 3 into fevered prayers for his Arkansas farm. By the 4th dawn on August 2nd, exposure and its cruel siblings, dehydration, claiming 200 via salt poisoning, hypothermia, dropping core temps to 85 degrees Fahrenheit, predation, and the quiet surrender of suicide, had culled half the flock to 400. Hope frayed to gossamer, the horizon mocked with empty promise, the sun a merciless inquisitor overhead. August 2nd dawned indifferent at 11 o'clock, but fate intervened at last over the largest group of 150, reduced to 40 skeletal forms. A PV-1 Ventura patrol bomber from Majuro Atoll, piloted by Light, J.G. Chuck Butler on a routine anti-sub sweep, crested an oil-smeared anomaly, a vast, iridescent stain bearding the waves like a funeral shroud. Descending to 50 feet, Butler discerned the horror, human flotsam, oil-blackened wraiths flailing from rafts and wreckage, their orange kapok vests faint as dying embers against the blue, arms waving in feeble semaphore. Survivors sighted, hundreds in the water, crackled the frantic relay at 11:25, igniting a frenzied cascade across the fleet. PBY-2 Catalinas from Kwajalein, led by Lieutenant Commander Adrian Marks, swooped like guardian angels, defying orders. Marks waterlanded his Dumbo on the 4-foot swells at 1300 hours, taxiing into the clusters to haul aboard 56 comatose and convulsing men, some so desiccated they weighed under 100 pounds, before his hull split on a wave. Destroyers like the USS Cecil J. Doyle and submarines converged in an armada of mercy by dusk, winching the broken from the deep with breeches buoys and cargo nets, administering plasma and morphine amid cheers that rang hollow against their ghosts. From 900 adrift, only 316 clawed back to life. McCoy, Harrell, Cox, Twible, and their hollow-eyed kin, ferried to Laty's embrace where medics marveled at pulses flickering like embers. McVay himself, adrift on a raft with 15 others, was among the last pulled aboard the Doyle at 2100 hours, his uniform in tatters, whispering, "My boys, where are my boys?" The Indianapolis's tomb was breached on August 19, 2017, by Microsoft co-founder Paul Allen's expedition aboard the research vessel R/V Petrel, her ROVs plunging 3.5 miles through the abyss to map the site's haunting tableau, the hull largely intact at a 52-degree list, her 8-inch turrets askew, the broken bow section 6,000 feet distant, munitions and propellers nested amid silt, a poignant artifact undisturbed by scavengers. Archival ghosts corroborate the saga. Her clandestine handoff on July 26 sealed atomic Armageddon, only for Hashimoto's torpedoes to claim her 4 nights hence. Of 1,196 aboard, 879 perished, not in the blaze, but in the indifferent deep, a toll exceeding the Titanic and Lusitania combined. Navy transcripts indict the silence, no distress ping pierced the ether, yet Guam's port director logged the ship's overdue arrival on July 31, Leyte reported her non-arrival by August 1, and 3 separate sightings, of wreckage, oil slicks, and even survivors, were dismissed as training exercises or clerical errors by a bureaucracy numb to routine losses. Captain McVay, scapegoat of the scandal, faced a rigged reckoning, court-martialed from December 3 to 19, 1945, at Washington Navy Yard on charges of hazarding his ship by failing to zigzag, despite Hashimoto later testifying moonlight made evasion futile, and delaying abandoned ship orders, contradicted by his own calm heroism. He was convicted by a 7-officer panel swayed by Admiral Chester Nimitz's reluctant endorsement at Forrestal's insistence. Reduced in rank to lieutenant commander, he carried the stigma through mandatory retirement in 1949, his letters to survivors laced with guilt, culminating in a self-inflicted wound on November 6, 1968, in his Florida home, his last words a note reading, "The fault was mine." Whispers persist of ignored pings, botched logs, a brass echelon blind to its own folly, oversights that birthed the Navy's post-war distress protocols, from mandatory position reports to automated SOS buoys. Vindication arrived in 2000, when Congressman Joe Scarborough's H.R. 3710 sailed through Congress, formally exonerating McVay on October 30. In 2001, Secretary of the Navy Gordon England inscribed the addendum to his record. Captain McVay's military record should now reflect that he is exonerated for the loss of the USS Indianapolis and so many of her crew. Today, the Indianapolis endures as a submerged requiem at coordinates 12 degrees 2 minutes north 134 degrees 48 minutes east, her ledgers and litanies etched in eternity through the USS Indianapolis Survivors Association's archives and the National World War II Museum's oral histories. She whispers of duty's razor edge, the uranium's glow birthing both apocalypse and armistice, the toll of veiled imperatives, and how even titans can tumble into obscurity. In her shadow, we glimpse not just tragedy, but the fragile thread binding ambition to atonement, a cautionary hymn for the ages, honored annually on July 30 by the dwindling band of survivors, now fewer than 10, who gather to toast to those we left behind.